You know, with 1984 being the 30th anniversary for a lot of 80s cartoons, there was one cartoon in the 80s that, well, even though it began in 83, kind of really got its footing back in 84. And of course, I'm talking about Alvin and the Chipmunks. And for many years, Alvin and the Chipmunks ran, not just in syndication, but mostly on NBC Saturday mornings. And then, of course, as everybody knows, in 1987, a movie that I've basically mentioned and talked about in a recent video of movies that need a Blu-ray release, Alvin, Simon, Theodore, along with the Chipettes, the counterparts, the girlfriends, if you will, Brittany, Eleanor, and Jeanette, all starred in the first major motion picture called The Chipmunk Adventure. Now this, of course, got mixed reactions. Some liked it, some didn't. You know, some basically felt that the message in there was being delivered the wrong way, or the wrong message was being delivered. But overall, the Chipmunk Adventure has developed a bit more of a cult following, especially now especially now over the past 7 to 6 years, or 6 to 7 years, with the release of the 3 live-action Alvin and the Chipmunk movies, and the 4th one on the way next year. Now, a lot of people have always, been fans. There's been a lot of people. There's no doubt about this. There's been tons of people out there that have been fans of the Chipmunk franchise. They have been. I'm one of them. I grew up on it. I remember when we first saw the Chipmunk Adventure. You know, we liked it. And in fact, I think anybody would agree that the show-stopping performance, the show-stopping musical performance in the show, or in the movie, was, of course, the Girls of Rock and Roll, or Girls and Boys of Rock and Roll. And indeed, that was a highlight, probably the highlight of the film. And everybody might agree that the Disney-esque song of the film, or the Disney-esque, if you get what I'm saying, the heartfelt Disney-like song of the film, of course, was My Mother, sung by the Chipettes. So, overall, Alvin and the Chipmunks have had a decent run. And even after the Chipmunk Adventure came out in 1987-88, NBC, along with the creators, the founders, the original creators of the Chipmunks, along with an artist known as Sandra, decided to give the Chipmunks and the Chipettes makeovers. Now, they didn't change them entirely, but after the movie, they wanted to keep the Chipmunk and Chipette design that was in the movie. And they did that, especially for the Chipettes. They kept that look going. Now, in the season that followed, which a lot of people look at as primarily season 6, or season 5, depending on how you look at it. You know, again, depending on how you look at it. You know, it all obviously takes place after the movie. You can see the influences in certain episodes and stuff like that. Season 7 came around, the Chipmunks design kind of was still similar to what you saw in the movie, except maybe the eyes and all that went back to being very similar to what, basically, the eyes basically didn't have the colorness or the color pupils in them anymore, not that I know of. Well, after that 8th season, which was just The Chipmunks, and that was another thing about that too. After the Chipmunk Adventure had aired, the decision was made to rename the show from Alvin and the Chipmunks to just The Chipmunks. Because now it just wasn't based around Alvin, Simon, and Theodore, or even Alvin's antics, if you will, or schemes. But it was also based around stories featuring the Chipettes. One of the more notable stories during the Alvin and the Chipmunk run was the Chipette story. You know, we had the Chipmunk story, obviously, We got a retelling of that, if you will, or a continuation of that, a sequel to that in one of the specials. But the Chipettes story also was an origin story to kind of tell us how the Chipettes came to be. How they came to be as singers, what they went through, and then of course, obviously later on how they met the Chipmunks. Well, we pretty much knew who the Chipmunks were anyway. But you know what's funny about that though, is the Chipette story, it ends on how they get discovered and all that. But then here's what's unique about it. This actually comes out, I believe, after the Chipmunks meet the Chipettes, because the unique perspective about this in one of the earlier seasons is the Chipmunks are booked to perform, I think, on a showboat or something. But then they find out that, but then the uniqueness about this episode is they're looked at as being like maybe frauds. So something happens, some kind of a mix-up, because it's like, wait a minute, Chipmunks are already booked, but we are the Chipmunks kind of deal. And then it's only when they realize, oh, wait a minute, there's female Chipmunks, we should name them Chipettes. So there you go. But yeah, that episode where they met the Chipettes officially came out before the Chipette origin story, the Chipette story. But the point is, throughout all these seasons, the Chipmunks and the Chipettes, movie, specials, and the specials especially were pretty good. You had the Chipmunk Valentine special, which was kind of a prom-like special, where you had, and what was unique and what was funny about this is it did emphasize on the relationship, the affection the girls have for the boys, and vice versa. And then, of course, you had the Chipmunk reunion, which introduced us finally to the Chipmunk's mother, Vinny, and again was a follow-up to the Chipmunk story. And that, too, the Chipmunk reunion, it got a follow-up, I think, in the following seasons after Chipmunk Adventure, when Vinny came to visit. Vinny actually wanted to see how the life differed from the life they would have in the forest, or something like that. She wanted to see how they lived. So you had that. So you had basically the whole Chipmunk family story separated by 3 episodes, and I believe, if anything, they should pair those together, at least in one DVD release. So you could say, okay, we have the Chipmunk story, here's the Chipmunk reunion right in the middle, oh, and now here's Vinny's visit, bam, there you go. I think they should do that. At least, I think, my opinion, they should do that at least to kind of bridge that gap. But anyway, you had that. And then, of course, you had the Christmas special, which kind of started it all, which was the Chipmunk Christmas, which was done, of course, by Chuck Jones, and was very good. And that, of course, led into the Chipmunks having their 80s cartoon, which was a very huge success, leading to the movie, and then the following seasons afterwards. And then, after they had the following seasons, which you can argue was 6 and 7, or 5 and 6, whatever you want to argue it, 6 and 7, as the Chipmunks, season 8 was a little bit more different. And that's what I'm trying to get to. And you can see right here that that's what this edition of the cartoon Flashback is about. This one, of course, is about the Chipmunks go to the movies, which a lot of people have looked at as season 8 of the Chipmunks overall series. And it just might be. But I don't just look at it as season 8. I also look at it as a spin-off series. And the reason I say that, the reason I look at it as a spin-off series is because the Chipmunks actually break the fourth wall a lot when they're talking to the audience. Basically telling them, hey, sit back, relax, and enjoy this movie with us. So, to me, it's not just season 8, but I think it's a bit more of a spin-off series than anything else. So, officially, the Chipmunks, the official Chipmunks run of just 11-minute shorts or 30-minute episodes, which they started to do, actually, believe it or not. They actually started to do 30-minute episodes in the following seasons. A majority of their episodes were 30 minutes after the Chipmunk Adventure, a majority of them. And then, of course, you get to season 8, the Chipmunks Go to the Movies. And like I said, the original run of the overall Chipmunk series was from 83, 84 to about 1988, 89. That was the original run of just original stories, 30 minutes, 30-minute, half-hour episodes, so many, basically a decent share of 30-minute full episodes, and I don't know how many half episodes, basically the 11-minute half episodes, if you will. But anyway, point is, I look at basically 83, 84 to 88, 89 as being the last official run of the overall Chipmunk series when it came to original episodes. Now, I do agree that if you want to look at Chipmunks Go to the Movies as season 8, hey, that's fine, go ahead, that's okay, that's cool. But the reason I look at it not just as being like the 8th season, but I also look at it as being its own series because, as I mentioned, the Chipmunks, and I think even the Chipettes, I'm not really sure, break the fourth wall when they talk to the audience and tell them, hey, sit back and enjoy this. So they break the fourth wall in a sense to give you this series. And what was unique about the Chipmunks Go to the Movies was they parodied a lot of different hits, a lot of different classic and at that time modern movies. Well, not modern movies, but at the time classic, if not more recent films and film franchises. They would parody them in their own way, and they would do their own version of them. Basically, they would parody them. Can't talk there. They would satire, parody them, if you will. They would parody them in their own way, and they would always have a different name, a name that was similar, but a name that kind of had the monk name at the end. Or something to do with Chipmunk, if you know what I mean. Like, for example, one of them was Chip Tracy, which is, of course, that they play on in a parody in their version of Dick Tracy. You had Sploosh, which was a parody in their version, their version parody, if you will, of Splash. Robo-Monk, one of my personal faves, parody in version of, their own version and parody of RoboCop. Star Wreck, which was, of course, a parody of Star Trek. And the list could go on. The list can go on. Bigger, which was a parody of Big. Kong, which was a parody of King Kong. And again, like I say, the list, it just goes on and on and on. Daytona Jones, parody of Indiana Jones. And again, the list just goes on and on and on. You had them parody National Lampoon's Vacation and things like that. So again, the list just goes on and on and on of what they did. And I think it ran for about 13 episodes, if not less than 13, but about the 13 episode range for Saturday mornings. So they did a decent amount. Like I said, you had Batmonk, which was a parody of Batman. So you have all these different movies that they would parodize in their own version, in their own ways. And sometimes depending on the movie they would parody, they would stay as themselves. Like Bigger, they wouldn't be called the Chipmunks, they would be called the Young Furs, but they would still be them. It would still be Alvin, Simon, Theodore. There would be no name change or anything like that. It would just be them. The only characters in that episode that kind of got like a name change was the Chipettes when they were known as the Babes. And that's about it. And that was another unique perspective as well. Every week when an episode would come out, you didn't know, the one unique perspective about this is you never knew who was going to play what roles. You didn't know who the creators were going to put in what roles of such and such parody of film. And what characters would get these roles. For example, Robo-Monk of course, Robomonk, this is how they did this. Now, for some reason, Jeanette was not in this episode that I know of. But the Chipettes that were Brittany and Eleanor, and the Chipmunks, all three of them were in there. No doubt about it. But again, here was the uniqueness and the funness, if you will, when it came to this spin-off series of the Chipmunks, or the 8th season of the Chipmunks. Basically, in something like Robomonk, Alvin, of course, would play Malone, or not Malone, but the Murphy guy that gets turned into RoboCop in the RoboCop series, and especially in the remake, which is coming out this week or next week. But Alvin would play the Murphy character, but this time called Malone. The female character, of course, who gets, I think, killed in the first or second one, her name is Violet. Guess who plays her? Exactly. Brittany plays Alvin's partner, Malone Murphy, the partner of Alvin, or Malone or Murphy, if you will. Basically represents Murphy's partner in the parody. Now, the mayor, of course, I can't remember how big of a role the mayor had in the original RoboCop. The mayor in this case is played by Eleanor. And very strict, wants to make sure, very strict, and it's like in your face, definitely a perfect role for Eleanor. Because we could see she could do that. You also had Simon playing the doctor, the professor that rebuilds, playing the part of the professor that in the original movies and in the remake rebuilds Murphy into RoboCop, or in this case Alvin Malone into RoboCop, or into Robomonk, if you will. And then of course you have Theodore, who would play Pinky, the villain, who would basically play his representation of the villain from the original RoboCop. So yeah, you had Theodore playing the villain. And the reason I mention this is because each week, as I was trying to say, the characters would switch roles depending on the movies they would be in. Like with Batmonk, you would have Simon playing the Batman character. He would be playing the Bruce Wayne character. And you might be saying, well, who would play his arch nemesis, his enemy? Well, his arch nemesis and enemy was played by Alvin as the jokester, a play on the Joker. And then you might say, well, what about the love interest? Is it Jeanette? Well, originally it was supposed to be Jeanette, you would think, according to some of the things I read online, but instead it's Brittany portraying their version, or her version, of Vicky Vale, known as Nikki Nail. I know. Kind of crazy, huh? But then again, that's not all. Again, that's not just it either. Another thing as well is another thing is you have other episodes. Again, the roles would be reversed. For example, when they did Sploosh, which was their take on Splash, Simon and Jeanette, that's right, this time Simon and Jeanette would play the lead characters. Simon, of course, would be in the role of Tom Hanks' character, and Jeanette was in the role of the Daryl Hannah character. And of course you had Alvin. He would be in the antagonist role, if you will. And then you had Brittany, that was sort of like in the tweener turned protagonist role. In other words, you had Brittany as a tweener, sort of an antagonist, sort of a kind of like a tweener role at first, kind of like antagonist, protagonist, just out for herself kind of deal. And then she turns protagonist at the end, from what I understand. Same with, now, you also look at something like Daytona Jones, which they play on Indiana Jones. Alvin this time, of course, plays, Daytona Jones, and obviously it's a play off the more at this time, around 1990, the more recent Indiana Jones movie was a play off that because, of course, well, at least it was actually a play of all of the Indiana Jones movies, but mostly the last two during that time, which was the Temple of Doom and Last Crusade. So you had all that played into one role. And this is one of the rare occasions where all the Chipmunks were on the side of good. You know, Alvin, of course, was Daytona, was in the role of Indiana, if you will. Simon was kind of in the role of his brother, which was basically a play off the father. Theodore was in the role of I guess you could say the Chinese guy or something like that, I think from the second film or something, I can't remember. And you had Brittany in there as the girl, as the love interest, that I guess turns good or something like that. I don't really remember that happening in the original Indianas, do you? But anyway, she turns good, if you will, because she doesn't really see what her boyfriend, the antagonist in this movie, is all about, or in this parody is all about. And then, of course, you had other things, like you had a play on Back to the Future, which was called Back to Alvin's Future. And basically what that was, and basically their take on that was, like I mentioned with Bigger, they would portray themselves. They would portray themselves, but they would end up going back to the past, just like in Back to the Future, and they would encounter the past selves. You kind of see where I'm going with here? Kind of see where I'm going? And then, of course, let's see, what else did you have? You had Kong, which was a play off King Kong, the 1976 version, by the way. You had a play off of that. You know, you just had a lot of movies. If you go to Google or go to Wikipedia and look up Chipmunks Go to the Movie episodes, you'll see the list. Click on it. Go to season 8 and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But they did a decent parody. But to me, they did some fun, decent parodies of movies that we'd seen before. And one of the lyrics in the theme song is they'll bring the movies to you. So basically, what they're doing in their own unique way is they would bring their versions of the movies you see. Like with their version of Star Wreck, that's probably one of the only times you see all the Chipmunks and Chipettes together. So that was pretty cool in its own unique perspective. Its own, again, like I said, its own unique perspective. So yeah, they did a decent job with this season. There's no doubt about it. Whether you like it or not, it was a decent job. And you know, you kind of saw, in my personal opinion, you kind of saw the writing on the wall, if you will, that something like this was going to be happening, that they were going to go in this direction. You know why I say you saw the writing on the wall? Because there were several episodes in season 6 and 7 where they would parodize or do their own versions, either through storytelling or dreaming or whatever, of different shows, books, and even movies. For example, the first episode of season 6, which obviously takes place after Chipmunk Adventure, is called Dreamlighting. And what is that? And that basically is based around a dream that Brittany's having about being in the series Dreamlighting. And here she plays Bratty Hayes, which is a take off the female protagonist in Moonlighting. And Alvin plays the Bruce Willis role of the protagonist, her partner, if you will, and thus love interest. You kind of see that there. And again, like I said, you saw the writing on the wall. You saw it. And then, of course, you had Albie's Angels, with the girls basically, just like in the first episode of season 6, getting knocked out and then dreaming all together, for some odd reason, it was so weird, dreaming all together that they were Charlie's Angels. That they were their version of Charlie's Angels. I mean, it was all there. And then, of course, they did Treasure Island and a few others. But then, and I think they did Treasure Island after that, and another one, I can't really remember. but you kind of saw the writing on the wall that the following season, the last season, if you will, was going to be that. Well, you didn't see that in the last season, but you kind of saw the writing on the wall. Like I said, that they were going to go, in this direction with the Chipmunks, the Chipmunk series. So you kind of saw that they were going in that direction, and thus with season 8, if you will, we saw it with the Chipmunks go to the movies. And one other thing about this as well is we all know that based on the history and being fans of the overall Chipmunk and Chipette franchise, Chipmunks franchise, Chipette franchise, whatever you want to call it. Well, not call it, but however you want to look at it. We all know that Brittany is Alvin's girlfriend. Jeanette is Simon's girlfriend. Eleanor is Theodore's girlfriend. We know that. We all know that. But here's the thing about Chipmunks Go to the Movies. They threw that out the window at times. They threw that out the window because you really didn't know who was going to do what. Again, they threw that out the window. Like with Batmonk, Brittany, of course, being her version of Vicky Vale, was the love interest of the Bruce Wayne character portrayed by Simon. And in Chip Tracy, you had, believe it or not, Jeanette being the love interest of Alvin's portrayal of Dick Tracy. So you kind of had a mixture here and there. And again, that's why I said they threw the rule book out they threw the shipping rule book out the window when it came to these movies. They did. Or came to this season, I should say, to the parodization of these movies. So they threw the shipping rule book out the window. Because obviously one of the things about it is they wanted to put someone they felt would be in the right roles. So that's what they did with this. They put the characters they felt would be in the right roles in those roles. Now, I think one of the things that some fans might maybe complain about, if you're a fan of the Chipettes, you were always glad that you saw Brittany, you saw the Chipettes in there. But I think one of the things that some fans might be a little upset about at times is that at times, in some of the episodes, you would only have Brittany there. Or you would just have one or two Chipettes. Again, it's all based on the roles of the characters that they were parodizing from the movies that they were parodying, if you know what I mean. It was based on the roles. So that's basically what happened. Like with the version of Kong, if you will. With the version of Kong, 1976 version, whatever, there was only one main female character. Who does that go to? That goes to Brittany. So some of the stories were based around that. Were based around to where you only had one Chipette, or you had one or two Chipettes in there. But overall, besides that little common complaint that some people might have, or non-common complaint, whatever, Chipmunks Go to the Movies was very good. And I highly recommend it's something you should check out, and I do believe that this should get its own individual 2-disc DVD release set. Its own 2-disc DVD set release. It should get it, and maybe get a 1-disc Blu-ray release. So that's all I'm going to say.